Welcome to another edition of Biblical Errancy Commentary, the series that takes a critical look at Scripture, pointing out its numerous errors, contradictions, and fallacies. This program teaches a kind of Sunday school in reverse, by giving you the biblical information that you should have heard but didn't. With millions of Americans hearing a totally one-sided presentation of the Bible, balance is greatly needed. Only when people are given both sides of an issue can a truly objective analysis be possible. And here to provide the alternative perspective is the editor of Biblical Errancy Newsletter, Mr. Dennis McKenzie.
Welcome to the 90th edition of Biblical Errancy Commentary. We're pleased you joined us. This is the second in a series of commentaries on the Sabbath. Having completed in our last program a biblically based explanation of why the Sabbath was never changed from Saturday to Sunday, we can now focus on the major weaknesses in arguments used by Christians to justify this change. In the last program, we showed the seventh day of the week, Saturday, is the Sabbath, and there was no and is no valid reason for paying homage to Sunday rather than Saturday. But, as is to be expected, Christians have concocted a wide variety of excuses to justify what can only be described as a blatant violation of a major biblical teaching, the fourth commandment. They have devised a lengthy list of rationalizations, justifications, obfuscations, and prevarications to prove that the day of worship was altered ages ago. The importance of this topic is shown in the fact that if millions can violate one of the 10 commandments on a regular basis with impunity, then there is no limit to how many and how much biblical teachings can, in general, be ignored. Because Christians heatedly deny Sunday observance involves any kind of fourth commandment transgression, we are presenting the following critique of their primary arguments. The first argument used by Christian apologists, the Sabbath was for the Jews only, is disproven by the following points. A, by saying the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath, Jesus is showing in Mark 2:27 that the Sabbath was made for man, that is, all of mankind, not a particular group such as the Hebrews. The Sabbath is not Jewish. B, the seventh-day Sabbath was given as a sacred legacy to mankind 2,000 years before the first Jew even existed. It was given to humanity by God on the seventh day of creation, long before the Jews were a separate group. On page 52 in the pamphlet entitled Saturday, Sunday, and Salvation, Dwight Herbert correctly stated, quote, "The text does not say that the Sabbath was given to the children of Israel only. It says the Sabbath is a sign that God is willing and able to sanctify His people." Are the Jews the only people to be sanctified? In other words, he's asking, are they the only people of God? Obviously not, unquote. C, the Bible never calls the scriptural Sabbath Jewish, but calls it the Sabbath of the Lord thy God, and God allegedly rules everyone. D, God called the Sabbath my Sabbaths. They are His and don't belong to any particular group. There are no Jewish Sabbaths or Gentile Sabbaths, as is proven by Ezekiel 20:20-21, in which God says, "Hallow my Sabbaths. They polluted my Sabbaths," unquote. E, if the Sabbath was given only to the Jews, then why isn't this true of all other Old Testament laws as well, since they all came through Hebraic writers and Jewish scholarship? If the Sabbath commandment only applies to the Jews, then the other 9 commandments should only apply to them as well. F. In Acts 7:38, Stephen says that when Moses was in the desert with our fathers, and the angel who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and was with the angel who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, he received living words to give to us. The final comment, to give to us, proves the Sabbath was not only given to the Jews, but to the Gentiles, because in Acts, Stephen was speaking to Gentiles and Jews. G. In Genesis 26:5, God said, Abraham obeyed my voice, my charge, my commandments, my statutes and my laws, unquote. It shows that Abraham was keeping God's commandments long before his descendants reached Mount Sinai. The Sabbath was to be held in high esteem long before the Israelites received the 10 Commandments on Sinai, which strongly suggests it applies to everyone, not just to the Israelites. The 4th commandment clearly states, remember the Sabbath. The word remember shows that Sabbath observance already existed when God wrote the law in stone at Sinai. On page 5 in his pamphlet entitled, Should the Seventh Day as Sabbath Be Observed?, an author representing the Bible Advocate Press correctly stated, quote, many today believe that the Sabbath was Jewish, that it was part of the ceremonial law of Moses, and therefore should not be observed by Christians. But the Sabbath existed long before the time of Moses. It was established by God at creation over 2,000 years before Moses was even born, unquote. The second argument used by Christian apologists to justify Sunday observance is that the law was nailed to the cross, so we don't need to keep the Sabbath. They love to cite Colossians 2:14, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to the cross. They also like Ephesians 2:15, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances. And they like to cite Colossians 2:16-17. Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of a holy day or of a new moon or of the Sabbath days, which are the shadow of things to come, unquote. Several problems accompany this gimmick. A, if the law was nailed to the cross, then the 10 Commandments went along for the ride because they're part of the law too. B, why would Jesus say in John 15:10 that he kept his Father's commandments if the commandments were to be nailed to the cross? And C, in Matthew 5:17, Jesus said, think not that I am come to destroy the law of the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill, unquote. In order to evade the obvious implication of this verse, some theology schools allege that fulfill means to abolish. How foolish can one be? They would have us believe that the verse should read, Jesus came not to destroy the law, but to abolish the law, which makes no sense whatever. Obviously, fulfill doesn't mean to abolish. On the front page of the pamphlet entitled Letter from Rome, published by Trail Guides, we have the following, quote, I can understand a Bible-believing Christian arguing from Colossians 2:16 that we ought to make no difference between Saturday, Sunday, and every other day of the week, that under the Christian dispensation all such distinctions of days were done away with,